Neymar trying to feed it through. It's a stretch.
March 8, 2017. This was the day in which the Camp Nou crowd bore witness to the game that would go on to be heralded as La Remontada. The world would go on to witness Europe's greatest ever comeback as Barcelona not only fortified their prestige in the Champions League, but also further heaped humiliation at the door of recently Qatari-bought PSG. What the world didn't know at that moment was what the aftermath of that game would go on to lead to. As the present day round of 16 fixtures come to an end, I wanted to go back and revisit and celebrate one of the greatest ever comebacks we've ever seen in the Champions League, and talk about how that game would not only have an impact on both teams involved in the game, but would have a defining impact on one of the best players we've ever seen in our generation. It was the very game that would go on to shape that player's entire career destiny. And that player that I'm talking about is Neymar Jr. Our story begins in Paris, as Barcelona would face off against PSG in the round of 16 in the first leg at the Parc des Princes. And it was a game that didn't disappoint as PSG stormed into a 4-goal lead with goals from Edinson Cavani, Julian Draxler and Angel Di Maria. I remember the fallout from the game as a Barcelona fan. The media completely wrote us off after the first leg, and there was so much chaos and so much frustration around the club that it felt like Barcelona were just waiting and veering to get back into the second leg. All the league games in between felt like they didn't even matter. I remember Luis Enrique in a press conference saying that if PSG can score 4 against us, we can score 6. And I remember one man in our team, one man in the squad, who created that famous quote as we all remember it: 1% chance, 99% faith. And that faith would reign supreme on the night. After an intense start to the game, Barcelona led by 3 goals before Edinson Cavani seemingly killed their hopes with a dagger in the 62nd minute. In that moment, the entire crowd fell. It felt as though Barcelona were never going to come back from that goal, and it felt like their adventure in the Champions League was over. But simultaneously, Neymar would go on to grasp the game by his own hands and score twice before assisting Sergio Roberto in the final minute of the game to send the crowd into complete pandemonium. In that moment, Neymar had written his name in the history books, all while safeguarding Sergio Roberto himself from an exit from the club despite abysmal performances for years to come. But after the ecstasy and the excitement that came from a win such as that, the aftermath was perhaps not what Neymar would have expected, as headlines and the big stories would display Lionel Messi on the front pages. And despite Messi and Neymar's very close relationship, there always seemed to be that feeling that Neymar wanted to be the main guy. If you were to look at it from Neymar's point of view, he had a right to feel unappreciated. He was the player who dragged Barcelona back into the game and ultimately won the game for them. He was the one who did everything, not Messi. Eventually, Barcelona would end up falling short in most competitions that season. But that night, that game against PSG, that round of 16 second leg, for me at least, was the beginning of the end for Neymar at Barcelona. Moving into the summer transfer window, despite signing a contract extension that would keep him at the club until 2021 that included that release clause, Neymar flirted with a move away from the club after many rifts with the Barcelona board. Tensions rose as Messi, Suarez and Piqué tried their best to convince Neymar to remain at the club. But eventually all those attempts would fall on deaf ears, as Neymar would secure his move to Paris Saint Germain, PSG would get their star man, and Barcelona had lost one of their best players. Moving to PSG was the beginning of what Neymar would believe was becoming the best player in the world. In his mind, he probably believed that going to PSG was going to be the time in which he would become the main guy of his team. He would become the best player in the world and he would win trophies for himself and for his team. Not being carried by Lionel Messi, not being carried by Luis Suarez, Gerard Piqué. This was his team. And arguably, you could say that in his first season at PSG, that is the best Neymar we've ever seen in his career. He was so complete. He was so dynamic. You saw all the skills and expression and passion from Barcelona, all while seeing the end product and decisiveness that you saw at PSG, newly found decisiveness. And he finally looked like a player who was ready to carry his team and be the main cog in a very successful team in Europe. But unfortunately for Neymar and PSG, he would go on to pick up a metatarsal injury just before their huge crunch tie against Cristiano Ronaldo's Real Madrid, who were seeking their 3rd Champions League in a row. And picking up long-term injuries in crunch time would become the norm for Neymar at PSG, as he would go on to miss 136 games due to injury for both club and country, sustaining 27 different injuries throughout his time in Paris. Now, obviously, Neymar would go on to win a raft of Ligue 1 titles as he played for the best team in the league, but the Champions League was always something that evaded him. But as the 1920 season came and the coronavirus swept the entire world, a differently formatted Champions League in which one leg rather than two would allow PSG to find their way to a Champions League final as Neymar starred against the likes of Leipzig, Atalanta, and Borussia Dortmund. Neymar was a game from realizing his dream of becoming the best player in the world. Unfortunately for Neymar and PSG, they would fall once again at the last hurdle, as this time it would not be injuries that would evade Neymar from the Champions League, but it would be Hansi Flick and Kingsley Coman, as Bayern Munich would defeat PSG in an empty stadium in the 2020 Champions League final. And of course, injuries continued, fans' frustration grew, and many fans began questioning whether Neymar's decision to leave Barcelona was the right one in the first place. And it seemed like the idea wasn't too far from Neymar's mind himself, as he was thoroughly linked with returns to the Blaugrana year after his move in 2017. But of course, with Barcelona's financial struggles, which Neymar ironically contributed to, there was no way in which he would be able to return to the club that he left initially. It felt like Neymar was regretting his decision to move in the first place. And it's a real shame because you look at the things that people like Suarez, Piqué, and Messi said just after he left, and even many years after he left. Barcelona themselves fell down a rabbit hole after Neymar's departure, and it seemed like both parties didn't even gain anything from the transfer. PSG themselves bought a player for a hefty fee that didn't even end up becoming the best player in the world that they wanted him to become. And Neymar himself didn't even realize that dream of being the best player on the planet. And even in that moment in which Neymar wanted to become the main guy for a team, he wanted to lead his team to glory. Many people can even argue that he wasn't even the main guy at Paris Saint Germain. Simultaneously, as they signed Neymar, they also signed a young boy from Paris himself, Kylian Mbappe, who seemed to have his own plans as he won the World Cup, and in Neymar's absences with his injuries, seemed to carry the team on his own. He's now currently the captain of the squad as Neymar has left, and it makes you think that he left Barcelona to become the main guy at Paris Saint Germain and lead them to European glory. Yet he ended up not achieving that European glory and not even being the main guy at the end of the day. All of this culminated in Neymar being circled by many clubs around the world, but ultimately none of them ever made a real offer, with European clubs being taken aback by his high wages and high demands in terms of game time, not to mention his very lackluster injury record. This led to Neymar having to join Saudi Arabia and join the Saudi Arabia propaganda show alongside many other world stars. There was so much fanfare around Neymar's arrival in the Middle East, but their excitement was swiftly halted as he picked up yet another injury on international duty with Brazil. This injury would be an injury to his ACL that would keep him out for over 6 months and counting till this day. I remember watching the Brazil game in which Neymar got injured. I can't recall exactly who they came up against, but I remember him falling to the ground and clutching at his knee, screaming in pain, and it was a huge blow to me. And it was, as I said, an indication to me, if not others, that this is probably the last time we would ever see Neymar at the pinnacle of football. An injury to your ACL at this stage of your career, after so many injuries that he's had throughout his career till date, it was just a huge moment for me. And I remember watching Neymar throughout his time at Barcelona. He was an absolute joy to watch. I remember seeing the skills shows that people used to watch, the skill comps that people used to make. No matter who he was playing against, Neymar had this effervescent, unpredictable, and truly fantastic demeanor about him. When he came in 2013, the raw talent that he had, that he then developed and honed to become this decisive, integral player in that Barcelona side, alongside Messi and Suarez. He always had a smile on his face, and he always had me jumping off my seat with the incredible things that he used to do if Lionel Messi wasn't enough in itself. He was an anomaly in today's era, in which statistics have always been favored over aesthetics. He was an entertainer, but he still had an impact in big games. You look at the 2014-2015 Champions League season where he was behind Messi, and some would even argue more than Messi, integral to that Champions League victory. his goal in the final, in which he slaughtered it past Gianluigi Buffon and took off his t-shirt and displayed a bandana that said 100% Jesus, as he basked in the glory of winning Champions League for the 5th time in Barcelona's history. It was incredible. It was a huge seminal moment for me as a fan, and one of the main reasons that I love Barcelona. That night in Berlin, as Neymar won the game for us, and we knew that we were the champions of Europe. His move to PSG broke me. Honestly, I could not believe it when it was announced. I saw the rumors. I believed that it was just the Spanish media doing the things they always do, but he actually left. And unfortunately for him, on top of that, he was born in the Messi and Ronaldo era. And had he had been born in any other era, I genuinely believe Neymar would be at the pinnacle of world football. And I feel like if he had just stayed, if he had just relaxed, if he had just taken his time and been patient. Now, obviously, Lionel Messi is a freak of a player, but I genuinely believed that if Neymar had stayed at the club, he would have taken the baton from Lionel. In no way am I trying to say that Neymar wasted his career, or his career is not a great career and a career that he should be proud of, but this is a player who achieved so much, and I just feel like he could have achieved more. I mean, for Christ's sake, he's the top goal scorer for the most successful national team in history, Brazil. He's gotten over 300 goals and over 200 assists in his time playing the sport. He's won Champions League titles in 3 different countries. He is one of the best players we've ever seen. But I don't know. It always felt to me like he could have done a bit more. He certainly could have enjoyed himself more. And it just felt like he lost his joy at PSG, which he expressed every single week at Barcelona. It looked like he lost that enthusiasm he had for the game, which you just need, especially as a Brazilian. If you don't love the game, if you don't love what you do, you're not gonna be your best. He was incredible in his own way and is an icon in modern day football. But it just feels like he was a prince who never became the king. That's a shame. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I appreciate all the support on the channel in recent times, especially the last video. The video did so much better than I expected it to do, but of course it's only from onwards and upwards from here. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about Neymar? Do you think he made the right decision going to PSG? Do you think his decision was justified? And if you don't, and if you agree with everything that I said, let me know as well. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, let your friends know about me if you think they would enjoy the sort of things that I make. But as always, make sure to take care of yourselves.